Okay, cool. Hello, it's another special Glasshouse session. Due to extenuating circumstances, we feel that having more of these public discussions is beneficial, not just to ourselves to talk it out, but other people might get something from it as well. In that spirit, we have created a notes document, which we will be sharing with you. Anyone can type in, drop in questions and stuff. This is what we plan on being discussed in the next hour that we go through this. We've got Silas, Jags, Dave, and Pablo joining us. And let's see, there's a bunch of stuff to start with. I'm going to start with the big question, which everyone's kind of wondering, like, where's the Russian cyber? Does this mean that cyber war doesn't exist? Open the floor.
So this is something I've been kicking around pretty heavily the past week. I've commented on it a little bit publicly as well. Like, one of the things that, so to me, like, we are right now in the thick of what I imagine is what cyber war could actually be. Instead of trying to predict and look at tea leaves to figure out like how this would actually look, like, this is the real world of like things happening. Like, we're seeing multiple actor groups engaging against each other. There's like really interesting, unique collaborations going on. And even without the Russians coming out to play in a lot of this, like, there's real stuff going on. And I think it's important because I wonder if like there's a lot of folks that are getting held up on misconceived notions of cyber war looking like pew pew maps, and without those maps, people are just lost.
Well, come on. I mean, we've joked about this internally a whole lot, but where are all of our wonderful cyber policy experts and all of our norms people who have been, look, we give them a very hard time, as well we should, because now there's cyber bullets flying everywhere and none of them are here to be found. And the reason I cast that shade is I think they've created an expectation of what cyber war would look like that, obviously, when the implant hits the road, it doesn't look that way at all, right? Like it was cyber war has been a fabricated notion, completely disconnected from reality, even in the most reasonable expectation. And now, everybody always joked about Ukraine being the test bed of whatever. I don't know about test bed. We're seeing the reality of a bit of hybrid warfare right in our faces, and it looks nothing like what we sketched out.
Yeah, I think sort of to that, speaking with an analogy, it's like these guys basically, they looked at sword fighting during the medieval era and said, like, we can't really imagine what that's like, but maybe if you dressed in all white and had like essentially like an antenna that you just try to tap someone in the chest with, it would be exactly like that. And so they build this up and they've got like all of these clever things going on. They're ready to start like the Olympics and shit. And then a dude rocks up with a lance covered in metal on a horse and wants to skewer them. And it doesn't make sense in their worldview. And everyone else is going like, what the fuck? This isn't sword fighting. Like, you're not even wearing white. Like, time out.
Look, I've never fought a war in my life. And I know much less about war than a lot of the folks in Glasshouse and in this call. But I don't think it takes, having lived in a third world country before, I don't think it takes a genius to realize that maybe, the power won't be around and things are going to flicker and things aren't going to work the way you want once bombs start to drop. So, yeah.
You live in Miami right now, don't you?
Now, well, it is kind of it's second world now, but I said having.
I used to dream of
how different is that?
Now I've got to throw shade. I've got to throw shade. All right, so first of all, yeah, without the pew pew maps, there's no cybers, right? Like, there's nobody wearing hoodies, therefore not hackers. But the lights have gone out and nobody's talking about it because the kinetic stuff is sexier, right? Nobody is talking about, I think there have been two stories, Jags, I think you forwarded me one of them, about power generation in Germany going down. Oh, there we go, Silas, there's the hacker hoodie. Power generation going down in Germany because the satellite link that links the wind turbines went down. And nobody's talking about it. Now, I'm going to bring in some dirty laundry about how the way the government and the military works with cyber, right? There's this thing called an equities conference, right? Where there's this constant push-pull between the cyber, military forces and the intelligence community, where the military walks in and goes, we want to do cyber stuff. And the intelligence community goes, no, you can't do that because we'll be blind and we'll lose access because you'll get detected, right? I can't imagine that Russia is all that different in that sense, right? And so, the things that we're seeing, nobody's talking about, we're kind of ignoring. And then there's the other thing of the equities conference. But the reality is that, even if you could show them things that are kinetic in nature, like, no, really, the lights, no shit went out because somebody hacked a satellite network, right? You're going to have some politician or some policymaker going, well, you can't draw a direct line between that and somebody dying. And so it just gets like wiped away.
Yeah, but if that's the metric, right, then you have, oh, sorry, I think Grug, your mic might be off because I just talked completely over you.
No, I wasn't yelling for once, so.
Go.
So basically, all I was going for is that the amount of cyber war going on is actually like, it's massive. But the thing is, people don't recognize it for what it is because it looks like TikTok videos and stuff showing up on Twitter, right? Like the information dominance by Ukraine is spectacular. It's like Russia didn't even show up to play. Like, I do not know where Russia is in this, but it's like they didn't know that the match was happening or they're at the wrong pitch or something, but like Ukraine is owning the space.
Well, should we give some credit
that
to
doesn't
the
count.
nation? Like, look at RT, right? Like, look, I think that it's not that they didn't show up to play, but I think there's a series of miscalculations that are happening on the Russian side, a variety of them. And some of them were, it seems, that they didn't think the response was going to be so cohesive. So I get the sense that a lot of the things they were counting on externally are suddenly unavailable. Like the fact that like our Twitter hashtags and trending topics all of a sudden make sense, like it is somehow indicative that like a capability that they were relying on is all of a sudden unavailable. And I think that's where we're seeing the Ukrainians. I mean, obviously they have a more compelling story, but also they seem to be doing info ops unopposed.
So it also seems like, as well, from watching a lot of RT, it feels like they're coming at this without the right footing as well, and they feel wholly unprepared, and they're in a very reactive mode to it. So instead of having sort of a pre-positioned narrative of like, oh yes, these are all expected things, like the war is going well, like they're having to separate out like probably things that are being fed and official narratives of things versus these protests.
Like they actually published an article that crowed over the secession and victory of the special operation. Like they put it out saying, it's been concluded, Ukraine is now part of Russia again. And clearly I think that the preparation work that they did do was for the wrong narratives. And I don't know whether it's because there's fear of telling the king that like it's going to go badly, or whether they just couldn't imagine that, or whatever. It seems like they didn't do adequate preparation for like alternatives. But just sticking with the information space for a minute, I think one of the things that is helping Ukraine a lot is there's basically there's two emotions that drive sort of what you engage with. And it's like anger or rage or joy, right? So if something makes you happy and like joyful, then like you want to share it. If something makes you angry, then you want to share it so other people can be angry. And Russia has built its empire on anger, because overall it's a lot easier to create angry headlines than joyful ones, right? Like you can say like, can you believe the bullshit that's happening? This hospital didn't allow something, right? Boom, you got instant anger. But what you have with Ukraine is all of the stuff that's coming out is basically joy. It's like, here's a bunch of farmers who have stolen a tank with their tractor. Here's some guys who stole a tank and they're going joyriding. Like here's a bunch of like people being happy and making Molotov cocktails. It's all stuff that like hits on the joy side. And so they're like really, really winning all around. Like they're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might be, maybe you should maybe go talk to the folks at Facebook and pitch them an alternate business model, because this is the cat memes versus doom scroll. And the truth is that doom scroll gets exhausting. I don't think anyone's ever said, I'm so sick and tired of seeing happy kittens. But at some point you do tire out from, everything's the worst and we're all going to die. But look, in the information space, if there is one thing that we're seeing is the absolute failure of Twitter, for example, to regulate their shit. The fact that we can see over a span of 3-4 days, the dynamic of an entire platform change because somebody can no longer fund something is worth discussing, right?
All right, so I'm going to push back on you on this one, because the reality is the Twitter of today is nowhere near the Twitter of 2016. And if in 2016, if you downloaded 1,000 tweets, 800 of them were bots.
Right.
In 2022, that is, you have to go find the bots. Like, they're hidden. It's like they're mysteriously, no one's linking to them, no one's retweeting them, they're gone, right? Like, they have made a concerted change. They have done the work. And so I want to give them credit where credit's due, right? Like, go ahead, do a quick search on I stand with Putin.
No, but it's
right, like, it's gone.
not that kind of stupid bot anymore, right? Like that was the really blatant phase. And I will defer to you as far as like social network analysis because you're doing the work and I'm not. What I'm talking about is the inflation of trends and like this strange thing that happens where I'll give that more credit than 100,000 bots spamming stupid programmatic stuff.
But the inflation,
you look at the right column in the US and it's all a bunch of like bullshit trends that no one can quite track. It's like, oh, why are we all talking about how like, Biden has the flu or something? Like, what's going on today?
It's similar to like how the trucker convoys collapsed along with the ruble for some reason, like on the same day.
I mean, that might just be you're right. Like we have to admit that.
But it's somehow, as soon as Russia money goes away, a whole bunch of things vanish at the same time.
Right.
And so the thing is, yes, it's hard for Twitter to do the stuff that Jags wants them to do, and I don't really fault them for not being able to do it as effectively as like just crashing the Russian economy. Like I don't think Twitter has that capability if they wanted to. But
okay, I just think
that's how you clean up Facebook.
They don't have the incentive to, same as Facebook doesn't have the incentive to.
The incentive that they're given is the United States pressuring them relentlessly for 7 years, which is not trivial.
I think you're over glamorizing it a little bit. I think that the pressure they're feeling is the global markets pressuring them, right?
That's it.
Believe me, Shell did not leave Russia because the president asked them to.
Yeah.
Right. So let's and the reality is it's kind of a combination of all of the things, right? So yeah, absolutely. Twitter has gotten much better about detecting stupid bots. But also, like Jag said, I think what we've learned is, listen, you're better off having cyborgs, right? China has lots of excess capacity. There are plenty of companies out there that will run accounts for you with live people that have no other way to make a living, right? And the other thing that has happened is twofold. The first one is I agree with Grubb. I don't think Putin thought this thing through. I thought he was going to walk in, he was going to knock off Zelensky, he was going to stand up a puppet, and this thing was going to be done in 72 hours. So I don't think the planning went into it for branches and sequels for what if this happens and this goes wrong. I think the thought of this goes wrong never entered his mind. And along with that, just the unifying coalition of people that are debunking the Russian misinformation and disinformation is staggering. It's been, I think that, places like the Naval War College and the Army War College are going to be studying this conflict for the next 20 years to figure out what happened and what did Putin miscalculate so badly that he's just getting absolutely crushed in the information space.
Yeah, I think it's not just the information space. I mean, there's a lot. I hate to say this, and I think we had a conversation before we even set this thing up. where we said, we joke around a lot, and it would be terrible for anybody to get the wrong idea about our tone with the Ukraine crisis. And I don't want to trivialize it. I mean, this thing is horrible, and it's happening to people we know and we care about. At the same time, I am looking forward to when this is behind us and we can do the proper postmortems about what Russian money was influencing and suddenly was not, about miscalculations of, not just our ability to predict what war is going to look like. I mean, look at the Afghanistan withdrawal compared to this. Obviously, someone in the US sucks at calculating, these things as much as the Russians seem to. Well, maybe that might be a harsh equivalent. But then also cyber, let's come right back to cyber. There was nothing in the way that we described cyber war going down generally that actually was reflected in this.
Well, there's been a lot of stuff we've had in the cyber policy community, which a number of our viewers are in, huge schisms of thought that are easy to see if you're reading a bunch of the papers. And like on one side was the deterrence team, and on the other side was the persistent engagement team. And I think we need to give the administration credit for leaning into, as Pablo would say, the equities decision-making process, being able to get finished intelligence on the front page of the New York Times in order to make decisive differences. Like that is a humongous strategic advantage that we've had throughout this thing and that the Ukrainians have had. And, that also applies to a lot of the other things that we're talking about. So, I mean, there's also, who knows what kind of agility we have with the civilians who are sort of all of a sudden volunteering for the Ukrainian information, what did they ask for, like IT army or something? I can't remember.
Yeah. There's even organized groups. There's a businessman, Ukrainian businessman, who has organized the Ukrainian Cyber Resistance Army, which I think is a play on the old Ukrainian, basically the old nationalist resistance movement against the Soviets, or something like the Ukrainian Resistance Army. So he's just slightly taking that. But this whole thing, I think this is where are our cyber arms guys now? Why aren't they talking about cyber arms? Why aren't they talking about what cyber war is? Where's the Talon group on this one? Where's the cyber norms people when it's all well and good to say cyber needs to be against approved military targets during an armed conflict between declared belligerents, and then on Tuesday, you have the president of a company going, okay, everyone hack Russia. And the entire world is fuck yeah, where do I get Kali Linux, right? Metasploit is fucking taken down by people getting copies.
Hold on, because I think you're hand wiping a little bit. There has been an official.
That is exactly how it was. I'm going to talk over you. I've explained it.
But I mean, again, let's give credit to due, right? You had the cyber rapid response team activate before the invasion, right? So Lithuania, Estonia, Croatia, Poland, Romania, and part of the reason they did it is they looked around and they went, if Ukraine falls, we're next, right? We're the next domino. So there has been some, for obvious reasons, we're not hearing about what they're doing and what they're not doing. But yeah, absolutely what you said as well, right? It's hey, listen, anybody that wants to play, download Kali Linux and off we go. Now, I have some legitimate concerns about that, right? Because ostensibly you have now, Western patriotic hackers and Russian patriotic hackers having a free-for-all. And it really only takes one group to take out what one country and another deems national critical infrastructure, and now we get a kinetic escalation. So,
well, worse than that, right? I mean, we are now in a world war. If NATO has said cyber is equivalent to kinetic, and attack on a NATO member automatically triggers Article 5, we are literally, and by we I mean the people on this Twitch channel.
Yeah, but this is where we have to start. We're letting ourselves get suckered.
And another thing about how awesome our specific niche is, and why it's more important than literally anything else in the world.
But here's the thing, Jackson.
We're getting pulled down into this kind of bullshit again. The magical mystery realm of norms, policies, and international law, right? by that measure, all the war crimes we've been watching happen to for real people with for real weapons maybe should trigger something for some, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of ways in which there's an abstraction layer between international norms and law and things that happen in the real world. And like, it's more likely we're going to talk about this in like in forums in 3 to 4 years, where we're going to say, well, maybe this general shouldn't have issued that order, and we're going to issue a stern condemnation, but that isn't enough to affect the actual conflict.
So yes, but I agree, right? Like the international norms discussion and the war crimes tribunals, they're going to happen after the war ends, right? But here's the thing: the unintended escalation to a global war on the kinetic front, we only get to make that mistake one time, right? And the fact that, you know, we've said things, Russia has said things like, you know, cyber attacks are on par with nuclear attacks, right? With nothing to back it, right? And the fact that it is not an established norm basically now gives them the out to go, okay, well, you know, you knocked out our website, so here we go, we're launching nukes. Do I think they're going to do that? No, I don't think they're going to do that, right? But it bears some consideration.
Well, let me put it a different way. If they were willing to do that, sorry, Greg, just one point. If they were willing to do that, isn't the whole point that it's an excuse? That they would have been willing to do that based on, you know, a Russian in Ukraine shoots a rocket into Russia and they're like, oh, here we go. You know, like it is very, the whole Article 5 thing, I don't dismiss it, but I do treat it as, here's the excuse we wanted. The same
it
way.
turns out, yeah, look, everything is politics. Like, it doesn't matter what's actually written down. It matters like what the people actually want to do. So there's a whole lot of like turning a blind eye when it needs to be turned. And I believe this is the point that Jags is getting to, is that there's like what's written down, and then there's what's actually going to happen.
I mean, the best point of that is, you know, they could have fast tracked when it looked like for the last year that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. NATO could have gone, hey, roger that, quick vote. Okay, you're in, and we can invoke Article 5. And they chose not to do that because they were afraid that then they would be, you know, painted in a corner and have to act. So, you know, spot on, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't bear having the discussion.
So this is what actually concerns me. Like Anonymous claimed that they had taken over and like knocked off a bunch of Russian military satellites. And like Russia came out and made a statement saying that we would treat an interference with our satellites as military attacks, which I think is completely reasonable, right? Like if you are a country in the middle of a war and suddenly all of your spy satellites go out and you're blind, that's probably the thing that happens before a nuclear strike or something. Like you don't have, like, losing that capability makes you turn to a different option set and start exploring what you should do given the time that you have available. So I completely agree. Like, there are bad things that could happen by accident. Now, I don't think Anonymous is going to take out spy satellites, but you know,
I mean,
maybe they're all linked up to a billing server somewhere.
I mean, there were some pretty interesting screenshots they posted, like from the access levels they reportedly had hit. So, I mean, just even aside, like even without the military factor, like a giant piece of metal falling to the earth, we hope will burn up in orbit. But
didn't Jags do a whole talk on how Anonymous is almost always a cover for an actual nation state? So yes, I think they can reach a satellite. And I also think we shouldn't underestimate what hackers can do.
So watching the like,
so Silas, just one point there. If we're saying that spy, you know, somebody pulling a satellite out of orbit, whatever, and effectively just taking away your GPS, right, is something that would trigger that because you're disabling an important capability for your troops. What if it were something? What if it were a, you know, phone ransomware, or like, it's not like these dudes are walking around with the highest end gear or whatever. Like, they're probably relying on a bunch of Android phones, checking Google Maps out there. So if we were to go there with a phone ransomware and just lock up all their goddamn phones, is that equivalent to Somebody taking down your GPS?
Okay, all right. I can't believe I have to say this to this group, but first of all, let's quit talking about taking out satellite facilities by launching rockets and go to the kinetic thing. Stop it. Right. This is like I'm going to start labeling you all policy and cyber warfare experts for the government.
God.
So let's go with the GPS thing, right? So it's not that GPS is going to lose capabilities for, combatants, for lawful combatants. I don't care about that. What I care about is, you take out GPS and all of a sudden electric power generation in an area completely out of the defined area of hostility goes out. Or crypto systems go out because they can't do digital spread spectrum and frequency hopping. And now emergency services can't respond, right? And now you end up with loss of life outside of the defined area hostility and or loss of critical infrastructure in a non-combatant nation. That's what I'm talking about, right? Let's not do the Hollywood, raining satellite parts from the sky. That's silly.
Yours is scary and realistic, and Jag's is exciting and clever.
Yeah. So the reason I brought up only the falling satellite was because it would have that possibility of impacting things outside of the conflict zone. Like that's the whole scope of it as well. And that's also been one of the problems that's been put into play from this, is from following the Ukraine volunteer cyber army stuff. Like they are going after quite a few non-military targets as well, which definitely blurs some of the lines of this, because also when you do create these groups, and this is where I'll actually challenge some of the hacktivist stuff of yours, Jags, is when it is something that's organic and has that legitimate feel of something being true traditional hacktivist stuff, there is a little bit of variation and wildness when it comes to targeting and how these things go, because you end up with many competing voices trying to guide the direction of these things.
Well,
You also
they're organized in a Telegram channel of 300,000 people. So organized is not even the right word. 400,000 now, right?
Oh no, four Telegram channels that I've counted so far.
Oh, okay.
Many others.
What a great place for information operations. No, I mean, look, I think we're arguing with a caricaturesque version of my argument about hacktivism, right? It wasn't that all of it is nation state, but rather that it's a fantastic cover for it. And something I want to bring up that I think we've discussed a little bit in this group. Hey, someone sent out an email under my name to a few reporters and the cyber partisans in Belarus, trying to get them to an Onion site with a leak by some new anonymous whatever group. I don't care. It doesn't bug me that they would use my name. I don't think anybody was effectively convinced by that. And I think, glory to Ukraine and fuck Putin is a fantastic sentiment to sign all my emails with. That said, that's when you start to look at things like there's so much happening in this conflict right now that amazing things are just being swept under the rug because the next big thing comes and the next big thing comes. I'm really curious about that leak. I wonder, because the whole point of the leak is this is a Belarusian defense contractor that is helping Putin. That's the premise. You put up a Tor Onion service to deliver 150 gigs over Tor, which is going to take you at least 10 days to download, assuming that it's a real leak. And then the minute it becomes publicized, the minute I tweeted about it, they took the Onion site down. The distributed denial of secrets is not sharing the leak, as far as I can tell. So you never answered the reporters. You lied about where it came from, because they said it came from BT, which is obviously not true. Were you just trying to smoke out the cyber partisans? Is that the idea? You feed them a little bit of Belarusian defense contractor and you email them directly and you hope that this cover is enough? Because the cyber partisans are giving Belarus a run for their money. They're actually putting a dent in that situation, and I'm proud of them. But it also means that there is a necessity for investment on the Belarusian and even Russian part to say, let's get rid of these fuckers, right?
I think the other thing about that is that there's a lot of very sophisticated cyber operations happening right now that are going to take us a while to figure out.
Right. So I was just going to say, like, one of the things that sort of comes up with the way that like cyber partisans is having a material impact on Belarus as a logistics base for the war effort. Right. It's, you know, like the small group of people operating from somewhere outside of Belarus, which implies that they're somewhere in Europe. I mean, I don't think they're based in like Niger or Sudan or whatever. I think odds are they're someone with better connectivity. But, you know, just like allowing them to operate in theory says that it's fine for ransomware to operate, the whole like allowing the cyber IT resistance national army movement to operate, like, where does that put us after this with ransomware? How do we get to say, like, look, you're not allowed to have people just living in your country hacking whatever they want for whatever reason? Like, that's just not a thing that's allowed.
Ransomware has changed overnight. Like, one of the most unbelievable corollaries of this conflict is that we're no longer having this bullshit conversation about it is a possibility that the Russian government is somehow orchestrating these ransomware gangs. We don't know. We can't tell. We're never going to be sure. Well, now with their internal communications literally leaked in some cases by their own people who are clearly not happy about this conflict, we can have, at least as far as Conti goes, we can have a very different conversation. And I think that's to the point, right? Like the Chinese practice of having a shell company somewhere that some MSS person or PLA person runs, but they're a cutout that allows them to do cyber, in this case, fell apart, right? We never got the comms to say that Chinese company is actually purely MSS PLA or whatever. But in this case, we can say, hey, the administration of the Conti group is very much aligned with someone in the FSB telling them, hey, go look for this and do that and change this and then have fun and enjoy your bajillions of dollars.
So the thing is, like, that sort of security mistake happens when you're operating in a safe environment. Like, you don't, like the FSB and Conti didn't feel the need to have a cutout of any sort because they couldn't imagine a situation in which their communications would be compromised. And clearly they were wrong. And I think that that's interesting. Like, the implications are interesting if you think about it. Like, there's a lot of other things where stuff that's secret is going to come out as soon as things change. Sorry, this goes off.
I just wanted to like ask you, are we ready to change our designation of Russian ransomware as officially the reserves, right? Like, we're not talking like, yeah, on the Ukrainian side, IT army, you're begging people to pick up Kali and like shoot someone. But like on the Russian side, yeah, who gives a shit about the DDoS and defacement stuff? We actually have a crew of people equipped with ransomware and like they know how to like get in, steal data and then disable our enemies. And they are the reserves now. We're not talking about them as some external function anymore.
If only anyone had read JD Works papers, which are 100% predicting this stuff from like a year ago, like 100% correct. I just want to put that out there because I think it's ridiculous that people have been ignoring this for so long when the answer was in a discarded journal right on their desk.
You need to record some videos for those of us that just avoid papers like the plague at this point and just explain the arguments. I'm not reading any policy papers. I will read JD because I know JD.
I think I've done a video on this paper from him from like a year ago.
Tweet it out.
So,
man.
All right, I'll paste these things for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, so like, I mean, we've been talking for a long time about how the ransomware groups are basically the auxiliary, right? Like they are a strategic cyber capability that's going to be used when needed. Now is when needed. Part of what I think people are wondering about, and they like, where's Russia, is there's been all of these predictions, like all of the certs are sending out, like, get ready, you know, the ransomware is going to flood everyone now. It's going to be really big. Any day now, just be prepared. Okay, don't lose vigilance. It's happening. You know, like, it hasn't happened yet. Like, I'm wondering when it's going to happen. But in terms of ransomware changing, I think one of the really interesting things I just want to bring up briefly is the Nvidia hack, where so like there's that hackback thing that happened, which was exciting, but the communique from Nvidia that came out, it was exciting. Something new happened. It was junk, but something new happened.
Hold on.
But I need to say one line and I'm done. So Nvidia released a message saying, we have not been hit by ransomware. People have stolen private information and they're demanding things from us. Which, like, ransomware has no meaning if having your data used to extort you is not ransomware. Like,
Silas,
sorry,
I mean,
all right, go Silas.
So I want to make a first point on the hacking back point, and then I want to come back to the odd ransomware and try to resell that data angle. So the thing is like, from what I saw so far on this, the evidence of a hack back was a screenshot of someone's ESX server and a like VM, so a virtual desktop somewhere, where somebody could have just hit revert snapshot, and it basically looked like exactly what the screenshot would have shown. It's basically a clean install of Windows 10. Like,
see, this is what cyber war looks like, though. It's like you go to all that effort, you hack someone, and they go reset, whatever, and keep going.
The only reason
like,
we're looking at
no,
this,
I need to like turn it, like, yeah.
the only reason we're looking at this Nvidia attack as anything significant is because of the timing. But it's not even proper ransomware. It is kind of like a shitty group, and the things they're demanding makes it sound to me like it's a bunch of 16-year-olds. Like, who is hacking Nvidia being like,
I think they have
the
a
source
well.
code for your drivers so we can game on Linux, man. Like,
it's also for finding out information about when the next Switch version is coming out, because like that's also been fun watching as people read the runes of it and be like, is this confirmation?
You're not thinking like the FSB, right? These are leading indicators for NSA purchases of GPU cards, and I cannot believe that you are so blind.
I think that's precisely the point. I'm scared of us reading the FSB behind everything, right? Like, this isn't Conti, it isn't, TrickBot. This is some random skid group that, to Nvidia's point, isn't even deploying ransomware. They're just stealing info and trying to make a day out of it, right? And I want to kind of place that hard line there, because right now it's really easy.
Very, very briefly. So like one of the sayings that they figured out during the Cold War, like the KGB is not 10 foot tall. All right. So like if you don't ever actually engage with them and you just sort of hear the exploits, they sound terrifying. And then when they actually rock up, it turns out that not as good. And I think we have to keep that in mind.
I think that's precisely the point, especially on cyber. It's really easy for us to make the enemy look 1,000 feet tall. In particular, when we're talking about the bullshit version of cyber war. Everything could turn off, everything could explode. Who knows? Maybe all the microwaves in Ukraine will suddenly start emitting radiation. It's just like, stop, relax. That's not, but there is a realistic end to cyber war, which is how much of an edge are they getting on the basis of information asymmetry? How much of an edge are they getting on the basis of how much info is being leaked by all these TikTok videos and information campaigns within Ukraine and social networks? How much of an edge are they getting by actually wiping down an entire organization that may have had a significant amount of information that was necessary? I mean, there was a report, unconfirmed, that Hermetic Wiper was deployed in the Ukrainian border agency at the time when you have millions of people running for the border. I mean, that is not, if it's true, if it happened, which is the caveat to every report we're getting out of Ukraine right now, and even Europe in general, if it's true and if it happened, that is a sign.
Are you trying to say that France doesn't exist? Because I haven't believed it for a long time.
No,
Conspiracy of cartographers.
What I'm trying to say is even those German reports about like the wind turbines going down. Can someone please confirm?
And why is there a French, why is there a site written in Spanish, hosted in Switzerland, talking about French windmills going down with no time at all? Like it's a thing that happened. Like,
that's why I didn't send it out, because I looked at that and I'm like, is this true at all?
I don't know.
And that's to our point, right? There needs to be a sizable post-mortem that happens at the end of all this, where we go, okay, there were 100,000 outlandish claims in all of this. And just because they're outlandish does not mean they weren't true, but which ones were and weren't true, right? Like there's a lot happening here that, like, even for us in our telemetry, man, like, look at how Hermetic Wiper came out. Symantec gave a sliver of victimology. They said this is financial sector. Then ESET goes, well, no, there's government orgs as well. Then Symantec comes back and goes, actually, there might be like some defense contractors. And at the end of it, you go, well, it sounds like they probably hit just about everything. And we just don't have enough visibility to say, like, this is the full map of what was happening in Ukraine.
Okay, so there's a couple of things there, right? So the first one is the FSB is not Baba Yaga, and I totally get that, right? Like, they're not hiding behind everything. But the other thing I'm just going to push back on a little bit is you're never going to get all of the information from the intelligence community, from government services. You're just not, because they're not going to share it publicly. And at some point you have to go, this is sufficient for me to, for any reasonable person to say that an operation happened there. Right? You're never going to get 100% attribution. You're never going to get the direct line from, somebody launched an exploit, therefore their bodies in bags, right? You're not going to get there. So you have to use a somewhat middle of the road, reasonable person's theory of analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
So
go for it.
I just one brief thing on that is, I think in that space of like, things have happened that we don't really know about. It's worth mentioning that there clearly was Russian cyber as part of their initial invasion plan, right? Like there were like wiper attacks that happened when they started their air war campaign, and clearly they were designed to interfere with command and control or some other, like, whatever it is that you use for air defense. And so there was a very, very military cyber component that looks like cyber war is supposed to look. It's the military targets being attacked by probably the military intelligence for the purposes of aiding military operations. Like, that's the thing that happened. And then I think they ran out of ideas because, they just started dropping paratroopers into the lake and shit. But, we forget about it, but like, there has been cyber, like, people saying like there's no cyber war, Russia hasn't done anything. They're missing out that Russia did exactly what people wanted them to do.
There's no cyber war because there's hybrid war. And that's really the point that I want us to, if we learn nothing from this conflict, I want us to at least walk away with that. The notion of cyber war as an independent, sort of like safe for everyone kindergarten version of war, where we can all sit at home in our PJs and still have war, is absolute bullshit. It needs to go away.
Yes.
But then you look at hybrid war, and we're talking about incremental effects, advantages, moves here and there. And we remember that the enemy does not control the entire space. You might have been counting on stealing some information or taking down a system, and then the power goes out because a bomb fell somewhere and took down a power line. And like, we need to stop acting like, again, FSB is not Baba Yaga, neither is the NSA. They might have had the best laid plans on earth, and then a backbone router gets blown up. That's the end, right? Like, that's the end of that plan.
John Deere is a weapon of mass destruction in cyberspace. I'm just going to throw that out there.
And squirrels, right?
And squirrels. Occasionally sharks.
So, I mean, you know what? Even in the middle of this war, I think squirrels are still leading the way on taking out the power grid versus cyber, which is pretty impressive. But just riding on Jag's thing for a minute, it's, again, I want to ask, like, where are all the cyber people that said cyber war is not escalatory? Where's the people that said, like, so we say cyber deterrence is not a thing, and I stick with it, but where's all the people talking about cyber deterrence when NSA is being deterred the fuck out of operating right now, right? Like, who the hell is being deterred? It's not Russia.
I will say it's not. So I will take the unpopular opinion, particularly right now, because everyone's terrified that, if you trip on a boulder somewhere, you might set off World War III. I will take the unpopular opinion of saying cyber war is not escalatory, because not out of being naive, but rather to say it's only as escalatory as a country already wants it to be. We're not talking about cyber war being escalatory in the sense
this is where
of,
I agree with you, and I want to bring it back, which is that cyber war has no innate nature of its own. It's just there's politics, and cyber war is either escalatory or not escalatory based on the contextual environment in which it happens. So right now, if NSA starts tromping around the Kremlin, that's probably going to be escalatory. But when that was happening a month ago, that wasn't. Right.
If they notice, and I mean, I think that that's the other side of this that we need to, like, again, as people who are very familiar with what cyber operations actually look like, let's keep in mind that we are talking about, in Ukraine, we've had the benefit of talking about very, very overt ops, because they're meant to do sabotage. They're meant to be seen. They're meant to spread. They're meant to blow things up, whatever. So you have the benefit of talking about all cyber as overt cyber. Whereas if the NSA were traipsing around the Kremlin, which I hope to God,
not get your money back.
Yeah, exactly. Of course they're
on.
all over that place, and the Kremlin can't even tell. So what are we discussing? Are we talking about, because wait, let's scale this back. Something Dmitry Alperovich has been pointing out. Our ability as a country to know everything the Russians are doing is unbelievable right now. It's been fantastic. Yeah. We know when every troop takes a lunch break, if they go to the bathroom, they people are hitting me up like, oh, invasion in 2 hours. You're like,
they set up a web portal that shares real-time intelligence with Ukrainians so that they can do operations, right? There's a fucking web portal being run by NSA giving real-time operations data to like people controlling drones and stuff. Like, that is insane, you know? Like, do you want to be on the other end of that? Absolutely not. But one thing that I think might be getting lost in all of this is I kind of think that Russia has been their own worst enemy in terms of their information capability and their cyber capability. Because while everyone has been terrified of them for the last, 6, 7, 8 years, while they've been doing stuff, we've also been learning how to counter it, because we've had 6 or 8 years of dealing with their operations and learning how they do things. And so in a lot of ways, they don't have the same capability that they had back then that they should have now. Like, they've burned a bunch of stuff, definitely in the information space.
This is the loss of surprise as part of this as well. Like, and Jason Healy, I consider to be one of the foremost experts of this, like calling out what a cyber surprise might look like and putting a framework together to think about that. But the thing with this as well is, like, we were expecting it, we were watching for it, and like saw someone post up a copy of or do a rescan for one of the kill disk samples yesterday, and like immediately like my antennas popped up and I was like, oh my gosh, like, but yeah, we've been expecting it through this, and I think a lot of that's been lost because of the years of it, like watching for it.
Well, so there's that, and Silas is completely right. Like, we have, there's no surprises in a sense, and I think that might actually be what's sort of taking the air out of the cyber war balloon, is people were expecting to be surprised by some capability they hadn't seen before, as if what wins wars is novelty. But I think we do have to give the Russians credit in some ways. They are organized. This isn't China, right? We're not seeing 300 cyber teams collapsing against each other and like, here's one box hit by 6 people, and like, we're not seeing that. Moreover, if correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that we've seen your normal APT-28. I haven't heard that we've seen full-on Nobelium. I don't know that we've seen actual Turla. We are seeing a bunch of groups that we're not quite sure how to cluster, using tools they were never using before. Like, there was a concerted, coordinated effort here to be prepared in a new way for this conflict.
I think what we are seeing is that there was a transfer of operational control from the intelligence agencies to the military. And like, there has been GRU cyber, but I think that like the GRU cyber people that do military stuff with military people had a sort of a different remit, different understanding, and different planning. And so, like, this is pure speculation, but that is what's like, that's where the new stuff has showed up from. That's why we're not getting like the same things we're used to. And I'm wondering, like, when are they going to go, well, we better bring back the A team because these guys aren't cutting it.
I don't think they will. I think the point is, like, if you want to say that this is all moving to the GRU, which, I mean, organizationally that might make sense from the outside, but we also saw that the GRU for 8 years was bull in a china shop, just breaking everything. So I do think that they didn't get a slap on the wrist.
That is literally their MO, by the way. They
Right,
used to have
which
to
is-
train. They used to have problems that their officers would show up in New York and pretend to be reporters and then end everything with salutes, right? Like, like flat out military officers in a suit going, "Hello, I am like Dmitry from Pravda." You know, sir, I have a question, sir.
Well, and that was the issue that, I mean, I think that was the issue they had with GRU up to 16, 17, 18, whatever. And then there was a reorg in their capabilities. But I think the point is, we're not seeing that reorg at play here. This is different. And more importantly, they're not tripping over each other as far as we can tell so far, in the sense that we don't see Turla there. Nobody ever fucked with the
why is the satellite hack not Turla? Because it's an update. It's like,
well, the update.
Why would it be
like
Turla?
that was the satellites are used to control things that are not wind turbines. Right?
Well, but my
Like,
point
there's a
here-
lot of capabilities that rely on satellite comms for, like,
I know, it just feels
control
like
from the
Turla to
ground.
me. That's all I'm
So-
saying.
Because they've used
Yeah.
satellites for comms before, but that isn't to say that they are the group that would do anything with actual satellites the way that they normally function. And I think the point here is, if you heard the story from a superficial level of a lot of the things that are happening here, you could easily, go out there and be like, oh, well, this must be Sandworm, this must be GRU, this must be Turla. But the point is, where we do see technical indicators, it is none of these things. It is none of those toolkits. And that's not to say that it isn't Sandworm, but it is to say, hell, they prepared a bunch of shit so that when they had to use it here, we wouldn't have that smoking gun moment of saying, oh, here's black energy again. Oh, here's, the shit that we're used to. Telebots is back. Like, none of that, not for a second.
So going on that, first of all, I want to throw furniture anytime any one of us says cyber war, right? There's no cyber war. There's war, right? And there are kinetic and non-kinetic effects, right? So I just think of the ugly pew pew Norse, cyber war map every time you say that. So let's go back to we've not seen this group or that group. So the couple of things. First of all, when you launch a cyber capability, you stand a real chance of losing control of that capability because it gets caught once, it gets reverse engineered, and now, it's no longer viable, ostensibly. And so, there's a balance that goes on of, hey, I've got this really slick O-Day that I've spent $10 million developing. Do I want to use it now and risk losing it, or do I want to hold it for when NATO jumps into the fight, right? Then there's the other balance of, this is the only capability I have, and I want non-attribution. I don't know how much non-attribution Russia cares about with Ukraine at this point. And then the final point is, hackers are lazy, right? If Kali Linux does it, I'm not going to go out and develop a new capability, right? Because I can just meet the effect with minimum effort, right? You can call it laziness, you can call it efficiency, but it's a combination. So we're not going to really know who's playing and which teams are on the field until way later. It's going to be 6 months.
I don't think we can rely on technical indicators to group back to organizational structures, which I think are overblown anyway, because people get shared between organizations. But I think the use of persistent engagement, the use of finished intelligence and burning it as a giant bonfire in the sky has forced the Russians to make like vulnerability equities choices that are nightmarish right now. That is the magic of the situation. That is what we are seeing. So I think that like if you were Russian right now and you had a good capability, a good strategic access and capability, but the Americans are dropping like what brand of toilet paper you use, would you put it into play? Like, I don't know that I would, right? Like I think I would save it regardless because I can't trust it anymore. No matter how good it is.
How much of this is, let's not conflate the entire timeline of the conflict, because one thing that I will point out as really notable, and I agree with you, and I agree with Pablo, that it's fucking stupid to take your premier capabilities and burn them at a time when everybody's staring, especially when you know that there might be a next phase to this with higher capabilities. But something really notable is cyber attacks kicked off this conflict. We got to watch the tempo of those cyber attacks escalate hour after hour, and then the invasion came in. And there's something really interesting about that, because there's something to be said about the moments or periods when cyber can make a difference in a hybrid warfare conflict, whereas when it doesn't, right? Like the more you decimate the infrastructure of your enemy, the less opportunity there's going to be for effective cyber. So what better time than obviously the months before, but then also the hours before the conflict?
Well, I think there's two things. There's tactical capability and there's strategic capabilities. So strategic stuff is like interfering with the rail system so that long term it impacts the amount of logistical supplies that can go through a country. Like, you're not going to do that the minute before it has to happen. But taking out, like, we make fun of taking out the electrical grid because that's not an end in itself. However, if you need to take the lights out so that your tanks can roll in the middle of the night because they don't have night vision on the other side, and you want the street lights out, taking out the electrical grid just before your tanks show up makes a lot of sense.
Can we talk about sorry, Greg, go.
No, we have almost no time, but I think that, yeah, like we saw pretty much what we would have expected in a cyber war, which is that effects that had real use were used in real time, and things that were not, surprisingly enough. Like they weren't wasting stuff. So
no,
go ahead, Jags.
I just wanted to bring something up, and to your point, Nick is in the chat, and he said, has been 9 days and Zelensky and ministers are still transmitting frequently and at length, speaking directly to people of Ukraine and more importantly, the rest of the world. That might be the ultimate sign of failure in cyber in this whole conflict. The fact that you have what is essentially a folk hero consistently transmitting to maintain not just the morale of your country, but also propaganda campaign around the world, and no one has been able to take it down.
He's doing it from a smartphone. If you had that $10 billion iOS O day, I could pick the one phone that you want to use it on that will have some impact on, the war effort. Like, there is a clear case there for like cyber could be used in a way that would have an impact.
Zelensky's OPSEC is DEFCON worthy. I don't know what burner phones he's using. I don't know what he's doing, but I mean, this guy's just amazing.
Whoever, the brand of phone that he has got the best marketing campaign coming up. They're going to wipe the floor with everyone else.
That's what the Apple event is about next week.
I think he just has a normal off-the-shelf phone, but on the back of it is a sticker with Rob Joyce's face. So I think it's all good.
Just wards off, any evil spirits, any bad cybers. We should sell that.
Yeah,
we should.
Okay, so we have exactly 2 minutes left. So I'm going to give everyone 10 minutes to say the final word. And so
I've spoken a lot. Guys. Come on, go for it.
Well, we love the sound of your voice. So we've covered a lot of things. Hopefully we've covered some of the stuff that's been sort of pressing, particularly in the public debate of like, where's Russian cyber? Cyber war doesn't exist because we haven't seen it. The use that Russia has made of cyber, the change in toolkits has been interesting. Like, we're not seeing the same things that we were seeing before the war. Now we're seeing new stuff. Clearly there was military preparation of some sort that went on. The information dominance is amazing, and yet it's being ignored by the where is cyber people. You know, if for no other reason than Zelensky still has a phone that he can use to post TikTok videos if he wants to. I mean, that's your cyber right there. And I think finally, just one more nahoy to all of the cyber norms people and the like, cyber is not escalatory and cyber war is one thing or the other. Like, turns out that they were wrong, and it's
Fisher Keller was
complicated.
right. I mean, the dude released a paper
Yeah.
two weeks before this thing happened, specifically talking that we don't know whether or not cyber is escalatory or not, right? So it's not that all the norms people were wrong. It was that like there was a distinct discussion between two arms of the policy community, and one has turned out to be more accurate than the other. Let's put it that way.
Right. So this is the thing that happens, right? So what we have is we have the discourse of war and the reality of war. So the discourse is what we all discuss before the war happens. And then as soon as the war happens, you kind of find out how close you were. And things can go sort of either way. Like if the reality is too far off, then we just say it's not war, right? You can say that, or you could force things to go the other way and just say, you know what, let's just make war much more like our discourse, which is how you end up with like nightly tournaments instead of battles.
Thank God that we have something to talk about that isn't Stuxnet, finally. I mean, not to make light of a horrible situation, but you can finally point to something and say, well, the 2022 Ukrainian conflict, none of that was.
Congratulations to Ukraine on showing what like real cyber resilience looks like, and an effective cyber war against a great state. And
I don't think we know what we've seen yet, to be honest.
We don't know anything. We don't know anything.
We don't know anything. We are indeed Jon Snow. But I also think a lot of this stuff was predictable. Like there's a reason I grade the papers in my graded policy papers review. Like I literally give them grades because some papers are better than others. Those people have turned out to be much more accurate when the rubber hits the road or when the implant hits the net, as Jags would say. So I just think like that's another lesson for me, is that like you can make good forecasts if you listen to the right people. It's not hopeless.
Dave, at a time when people are overwhelmed, could you put out just one succinct tweet saying these are the top 3 relevant papers for this conflict? Because like I don't, none of us have the time, but I am.
It's a great idea.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yes. I
won't even do which papers. I'll do which points in the papers.
I think that's the next Glasshouse Center. I think we should all read the papers, then argue about them.
When we're out of conflicts and no real work to do, then we can all sit down and read.
That's never happening.
It's never happening.
There you go.
I'll read them for you. That's my job.
That's the guy.
So with any luck, next week we'll be back to talk about the conclusion of the Ukrainian war and the collapse of Russia. Knock on wood. But if not, we do plan on coming back and having another follow-up to see what's happened with the cybers in the meantime. So thank you everyone for joining us on the chat, for putting notes in our document, and we'll see you later.